computer. All right. I am not the most tech savvy person. You guys all should know that by now. All right. So, good morning and welcome to the Employability Skills Series, where we explore the top skills employers are looking for in candidates. Each week, we will cover a different topic with thoughts and insights from professionals in a variety of industries. I am your host, Megan Morrow, Senior Associate Director of Experiential Learning and Employer Relations. And today I have Ryan Buckley, Director of Development, as my guest, and we will be discussing the importance of pointing out mistakes without demoralizing in the workplace. Ryan is originally from Long Island, New York, and attended Florida Southern College from 2011 to 2015, and again for his MBA, graduating in December in 2016. Ryan got his start with the Tampa Bay Lightning organization in their client service department. He then worked back in Polk County for Visit Central Florida. Most of you guys know that with Alex Dry, who's very active on our campus with Visit Central Florida Sports. He followed by his tenure with the Lakeland Magic, the GI League affiliate of the Orlando Magic. In his first season with the team, Ryan worked in an account executive role in the corporate partnership department, finishing fifth in the G League in sponsorship revenue. Congratulations. He worked his way up to vice president of the team, responsible for all revenue generating roles within the organization. Most recently, Ryan was the director of member experience with the Orlando City and Orlando Pride soccer clubs. Ryan managed a team of 6 to 8 individuals who oversaw all of the season ticket members for both clubs. Ryan returns to his alma mater as the Director of Development for the Barney Barnett School of Business and Free Enterprise. Ryan is also on the boards of the Central Florida Speech and Hearing Center, which holds a special place in my heart because my little one actually had to go through that and was in speech therapy for a long time. And the Florida Festival and Events Association. Some other fun facts about Ryan is that he managed 8 individuals with the Lakeland Magic organization and managed a team through COVID. He also oversaw a 12-person department in the Orlando City Pride with 6 to 8 direct reports. He can also dive into feedback performance review structures and the importance of establishing transparency during one-to-ones, as well as work-life balance and implications in feedback. So, good morning, Ryan. That's quite an impressive introduction. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. And I do apologize if you hear, I don't know, hopefully you can, but if you just hear one loud individual in the background, there's a random baseball meeting that moved next to me. So I'll scoot over a little bit so it's better audio.
That's okay. For those of you joining us in the call, Ryan is just gracious enough to share his time with us. He's actually joining us remotely. He's spending some time with his family, but dedicated to us and the call. And he's joining us even though he's with his family away from work. So thank you again. So thank you, Ryan. So tell us just a little bit more about yourself. I mean, again, that was a pretty impressive bio, but tell us a little bit more. You just recently joined us a couple months ago, but tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you guys can tell, definitely very invested in the sports world. So that was kind of the heavy focus for me was working within all the different sports. I started with the Tampa Bay Lightning. The same year they went to the Stanley Cup final. So that was really cool to be able to go to all the playoff games. That was back in 2015. To go to all the playoff games, work with all the different departments. I got to work with every department you could think of within a sports organization. There's a lot, that exists within that field. So it's good to kind of during your internship know what you do want to do and don't want to do. And then from there, I worked with the Orlando Magic development team, which was part of the Gatorade League or the G League, the Lakeland Magic. They're now in Osceola. But at the time they were in Lakeland, they were right down the road to the RP Funding Center. So I was there for 4.5 years and started as an entry level all the way up to VP of the team. So that was really, really cool experience to be able to see the full inner workings of the business and how each part interacts with the other. And then have that small town feel. Like I went to Florida Southern, I stayed in Lakeland, so it was cool to have a team that represented the community. And then, yeah, I mean, just not to rehash my introduction, I would say just on the side personally, I have 2 small boys. So I have a 2-year-old and then I have an 8-month-old. So I was driving from Lakeland to Orlando every day. As some of you may know, it's a pretty tough commute to keep up. once we knew we were having a second child, I just couldn't sustain the drive back and forth and leave my wife alone with both kids. So looked at different opportunities and options that were available. This opportunity at Florida Southern College appeared. It was very attractive and get to work with people like Megan and people over in the school of business. So it's a pretty easy transition and it's been a lot of fun so far. But happy to dive in. I'm very familiarized with this topic, obviously, so happy to share any insights for the group.
Yeah, looking at your very impressive resume, being in a position of leadership and managing teams and everything like that. When I was looking at the topics, I thought, oh my gosh, this would be a you would be a great speaker on this because you have been in a position to oversee a team, and I'm sure that you have had to, have to point out mistakes and stuff like that, and that is probably one of the most non-fun aspects of being a leader or being in a position of leadership. So, real fast before we kind of dive into this, one of the things I kind of forgot to point out, students who are on the call, if you're logged in, oh, I see someone. Let me admit all of our people. If you logged in on your computer, there's a QR code on the screen. I hope that you guys are seeing the image on the screen. Please scan the QR code so that you get your attendance captured. If you've logged in on your phone, I did put the URL on in the chat pod, so you should be able to click on that. So again, you get your attendance captured. So good morning, everybody. Thank you again for joining us. I'm glad that you are here. Okay, so we're going to keep that up on the screen for you. I don't know why whatever I just did, did like a line through there. Again, not the most tech savvy person. All right, so our topic is about pointing out mistakes without demoralizing. So Ryan, what does that even mean to you? First of all, what does that mean? And then we'll talk about what that means in the workplace.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I think, it's super important to have feedback, right? I think, whether I'm 10 years into my career, right? Or if you're 1 year into your career, like you always want to do better in theory. I think everyone's striving to be the best performer they can be and also the best individual they can be inside and outside of the workplace. So having a culture that says, hey, we're going to provide authentic feedback to you, but know that it's coming from a place that we see value in what you bring to the organization. And we believe this feedback is going to propel you to a new level, is really kind of where it starts. So I think oftentimes, when there's a topic like this, you kind of jump to one specific instance, right? It's like, well, tell me about a time that this happened and tell me about a time. And that's certainly very easy to do. And it's good anecdote to have. I think this topic actually stems from onboarding and like when you join an organization, like what are the expectation levels? So if you join, and I always use this example, and hopefully this will resonate with some of you. One of my biggest pet peeves is when someone says good job. Like, hey, you're doing a good job. I'm like, well, what am I doing that's good? Right? Like quantify that. Because otherwise it just feels sometimes very disingenuous, right? So, hey, I noticed you took this project on the other day and we've seen X amount of, percentage increase in this capacity. Like, I just wanted to commend you for that. I hope you keep up the good work. Well, that's authentic, right? Like they took the time to actually evaluate like what aspect of it I'm doing a good job with. So I would take the same approach when providing feedback. It has to be specific. It has to be prioritized or preemptive. So in other words, there has to be a mutual understanding that we have a culture and a dialogue of transparency and feedback. And the third is it has to be actionable. Like I have to be able to take the feedback, apply it, and then put a timeline to it. A week later, a month later, we can revisit it. So I think, yeah, it's always seems like something that's going to be the super negative, but I think that's just if it's negative if you don't have a structure set up. If you have something in place and everybody's on the same page, it's actually pretty easy to give feedback, even if it's not the best feedback to give or news to share.
Okay, I like that. So you said specific. I was taking notes. You said specific, and then you said something, and then you said actionable. What was that second piece? Specific, what?
Yeah, yeah. I think like what are specific and actionable, I guess would be the same thing, but like that and then a timeline, right? So
Timeline.
I have an
Okay.
action, like what's the timeline I can work against? I
Okay,
think
got
that's
it.
super, super important is before you even dive into a specific example, like what of these elements are in place within the organization and culture, right? That's expected. I've worked at places, my most recent job. I mean, I can't speak enough to how great of an organization Orlando City is and how they do on both ends of the clubs with the city and pride. It's really one team, even though there's two separate teams playing organizationally, where they were one unit. But I mean, it fostered hey, you're gonna get feedback.
Yeah.
And we want everybody to move at a certain speed and certain rate. And it was great. I mean, it helped me grow as a person for sure. And I think, it's because I had that perspective that the news I'm getting isn't mean, right? It's not mean-spirited. It's not something to say you're not doing something accurately. It's to say, hey, this is the level we want people to perform at in this specific area. We think you're here. Here's what we can do and resources we could provide, to move you further along.
Oh, I think that's wonderful. I like that. So specific, a timeline, and then something that's actionable. I wanted to kind of touch on so students were on the call, like Ryan said, feedback doesn't have to be negative. And I think that when we think of feedback or we think of like an evaluation, I think it almost instantly like stirs up a negative connotation. Like we think, oh gosh, our boss wants to talk to us. Oh gosh, I'm in trouble. It almost stirs that up. It doesn't have to be that way. But even if it's something that we can improve upon, it doesn't necessarily, you don't have to take it negatively. And that shows that if you can lean into it, it shows that you have a growth mindset, which will go along with emotional intelligence, which was another topic we talked about a couple weeks ago. Emotional intelligence, which, if you were on that call or have watched the recording, is directly tied to salary, actually. And I didn't know that. I learned that in the call too. People who have high emotional intelligence have actually higher salaries. So if you're money driven, work on your emotional intelligence. But if you can lean into the feedback and lean into that little bit of discomfort, because no one wants to hear that that you're not doing something right or that you might need to do something better. But if you can take it constructively and say, okay, great, because you're human, you're not perfect, no one is, and maybe your strengths are over here, but you could do a little bit better over here. And if you can take it constructively, and if you are blessed with what sounds like with Ryan's great experience with Orlando City, and I know that I'm blessed with the team that I have, that when my boss wants to come to me and say, hey, Megan, you're doing this really wonderful, but I think that you could we need to work on these areas. It comes from a place of, hey, I just want you to do better as a person, and also you'll do better for the organization. And I have a growth mindset because I want to do better, and I look for reasons to grow. So I want to say, hey, how can I do better? What can I do better? I even do it with my children. Hey guys, how am I doing as a mom? Like I check in. How am I doing as a mom? What can I do better? What can I do less of? What can I do more of? So great. I think that's wonderful. Thank you for that. I love the specific timeline, actionable. Um, Now, Ryan, can you tell me about a time maybe where, whether it's you or maybe somebody that you saw in your organization that maybe had to point out mistakes that was in the organization that maybe didn't quite do it, like maybe we'll say appropriately, or maybe like that wasn't in a way that maybe they did kind of demoralize, and how that maybe negatively impacted the person or the team, and how that went down?
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing too, before I jump into that, you said that I think is important that I did overlook. I think when you have that, we'll call it a meeting, right? But when you have that meeting or that, whether it's impromptu or it's scheduled with that individual that you're going to get feedback to, it is important to start with like, hey, I just wanted to check in, right? Like, how's everything going? Give me an update. You should be surprised sometimes. Sometimes it's a mental, right? Like I know what I'm doing. I'm mentally blocked because of X, Y, and Z, right? And in sports in particular, you work long hours, you work weekends. It's very fast paced. There's a lot of demands out of each individual in the organization. So it is sometimes just very easy to say, like, hey, it's not that they're not doing their job efficiently. It's that they have 10 other things on their plate. Like, we just need to actually shuffle some responsibilities. So it's a good point, Megan. Like, sometimes it is good to kind of set the expectation of, hey, I just wanted to catch up and see how everything's going. Right.
Mhm.
And evaluate where that's at. And sometimes if you miss that step, that's where you run into the issue of, hey, this was really demoralizing. Right. Like, they didn't even take the time to ask what's going on or what do I need or what can I do better. I think sometimes that is a misstep. So to segue to that, I think I have a couple examples floating in my head. One that I can give is somewhat specific, because I actually think is a big challenge when it impacts stuff cross departmentally. Like, that's the biggest. that's the biggest to me where there would be an opportunity to point something out that maybe isn't the best way to go about it, so to speak. I'm not wording this very efficiently, but I'll give you this example. When, there's a game and you work with whether it's a, marketing department or an analytics department, if it's a corporate partnerships, and there's all these different floating departments with a sports organization. I think sometimes you internally look at like, what do I need versus what do we need? Right? Like it doesn't really have a collective mindset. It has like, hey, this is what I need out of this meeting. Sometimes that's totally fine. I think other times what it does is it creates this unrealistic expectation of the group. And so, saying, hey, I need this report, I need to work with this partner, and I need this marketing collateral, and I need it in a week. That's not probably not realistic depending on the time frame we're working against. But I think within those meetings too, there's stuff that like your direct boss or people on your team are not privy to, right? Like when you're the only one in the meeting. And so I think a lot of these areas happen with cross-departmental meetings because not every chef is in the kitchen, right? And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
someone asks a question, why isn't this done or why isn't that done? It should be already released, it should be already set. Well, you're pointing out my mistake, or conversely, another department is taking the brunt of it, when in reality, it's four other people in the room, right, that have all these different responsibilities and things to do. And so I think, kind of generalizing this a little bit, but I would say cross-departmental initiatives where you have two plus different departments involved in one conversation, that's really not the best time to give feedback to someone on your team, or conversely, someone below you if they have something, because they're just not privy to those conversations. So I think that's something that I really struggled with. It took me a while throughout my career to kind of get used to that. And I think the way you solve that is just always doing a recap at the end of the week. Here's what's going on. Here are the moving parts. And here's where you have to go. One example I can give you for me in particular was when I started my career. I was an intern with the Lightning. And I think one of the challenges is like you all work different schedules, right? So I would come in at 1, but somebody started 8 to 12. We had a note sheet that we would use. And it was on Excel, very old school, but it was like, here are the tasks we've been assigned today. Here's what I've done. Here's what's left. And somebody just didn't save the document. Like they went in, typed everything, closed it out. And so when I opened it up, there was nothing on there. So I just assumed it was a slow morning. 3 o'clock comes by, and I have my boss who's like, where are all this stuff we need? I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. She's like, you have to communicate better with your team. It's like you cannot come in and not have nothing to do. Well, it's not, I don't have nothing to do. I've been asking, what projects need to be done. And it took basically all afternoon, to figure out like, oh, it was just the last person who didn't save this workbook. But I mean, prior to that, I had a meeting with my boss about like how I can communicate better. What are things I need to do to be a great teammate? How can I ensure that I'm being productive while I'm on the clock? Well, like, to your point earlier, Megan, like, that's not even my fault, right? So I'm taking the
Mhm.
brunt of all this stuff. Now, the next day, I have this kind of sour taste, right? And I have this awkward relationship because in my eyes, I'm taking the brunt of something that I had nothing to do with it. And it's fine. You work it out, you be transparent with each other. But I think that's a great example of like when you just don't ask what happened, what's the process you guys use, right? Maybe the process we're using just isn't effective. Maybe it needs to be handwritten versus on a computer. It probably should have been more of a conversation of what's the process you guys have and how can we improve it versus what are you doing wrong and why couldn't you,
Hmm.
accomplish these things. So that's probably the best example I have.
Yeah.
And I was an intern, so I was scared for my life. So I think fast forward now, it's a little bit easier to handle some of those conversations.
Yeah, sure. Because, you're a little bit older, you're a little bit more confident, you've got a little bit more maturity, and you're like, again, probably just the confidence. As you're speaking, I have like the best example that comes to my mind. I worked only for 1 year, and I've shared this example with my students so many times in every class. And like I joke with them, I said, I worked with this company for 1 year, and I said it aged me 10. I said I'm really only 25. It was because this boss was it was a tyrant. I mean, there's no other way to describe this person except as an all-out tyrant. And one of the most cliche sayings that people will say about leadership is praise in public, reprimand in private, and kind of all the things that you're saying. Like we would have these team meetings, and this tyrant would just berate me. I was the principal. It was a small school for adjudicated youth, and which, if you don't know what that means for those in the call, it's for people who'd gotten in trouble with the law. So it was 45 students, and they all had like probation officers and been in and out of jail and everything like that. And I was the principal at the school, and then but we had another side which dealt with the POs and everything like that. And so anything that went wrong in anything that went wrong with education, I got the brunt of it. I got yelled at in front of the entire staff. And I'm talking like, and I'm just sitting there just like dying, like this was something that needed to be handled. I was part of the leadership team and I'm being screamed at, yelled at, berated, demoralized in front of the entire staff, in front of the people that answer to me, and I'm just sitting there having to take it. And he would just yell at me. And then on the other side too, anything that went right, he took full credit for. It would be something that I did. It was only me. It wasn't even a team effort. It was something that I did. And not only would he take credit for it, but he would like email the entire organization because it's a nationwide company. He would email the entire organization, look what I did. Look what I did. And I would get like no kudos. Not like I did it for the kudos, but like, again, he would scream, and it was just like, oh my gosh. And I would go home crying. I would come into work crying. I couldn't even enjoy my weekends because I knew that I had to deal with this tyrant. And he lost me. He lost me as an employee. And that's what will happen. I mean, and there's another saying that you hear all the time in workplaces, like people don't leave bad jobs. They leave bad management. And another thing I always tell my students in class, like, don't ever have false loyalty. Don't stay in a job because, well, I took the job, I have to stick it out. Yeah, stay and give it your all. But if you have a boss who, like the one I just described, or it's not working out, work there, give it your all. But if it's not working out, do your due diligence, put in your 2 week notice or 4 week or whatever, and then move on. So yeah, so when you have a boss like that, sometimes you will, sometimes you absolutely will, because there are just people out there like that. But get away from that. Absolutely. You don't have to deal with that. You don't have to put up with that. Don't stick it out for a year like I did. Don't cry away your weekends. Get away from that.
I would say
Yeah.
too, it's kind of like a little bit of a segue off of that.
Mhm.
I think when you're in that mindset, which I'm sure most of the students are, where you're starting to interview or you're starting to resume develop and throw stuff out into the ether and look at all these different opportunities that exist. I mean, I was interviewing a lot. I had two open positions, and I was trying to be very selective because sports is very high turnover. So you almost kind of, in a weird way, have to look at it as like who's going to be the most productive person for a year. As odd as that sounds, right? Just because that's kind of the scope of the industry. But the people that always stood out, and I would always say this in the interviews, like I just want to be totally transparent. You are going to get feedback, in this job. And it's not all going to be good. There's going to be stuff that's here's what we need you to work on, here's improvements. But my commitment to you is that you will have a resource, whether it's me, another department, a software, a tool, a development opportunity, like resources will be provided. And if we don't have it, we'll get it. That's the commitment on this side of the table. What's the commitment on your side of the table? And the two people I hired, they both did separate interviews, but they both said the exact same thing, which was I am not so much worried about how fast I grow. I'm more worried about the quality of growth opportunity that exists. They didn't say that exactly, but that's kind of paraphrase. And I think that's so important because I think the cliche and the big thing to say in the interview is I'm looking for growth opportunity, right? I want to grow with the company. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, I think everybody does, right? I would hope everybody that interviews wants to grow to some capacity. But it's like saying that extra line of like, I want to have training from this organization that allows me to grow regardless of the rate I grow at. But I know I'm going to get the best growth opportunity in terms of quality instruction and training and resources here. This is what I think I'm going to get. Like that just is a separator. And the reason I think that ties into this discussion is because you have to kind of believe that mindset. Like you have to tell yourself, like, I'm okay with going to an organization that offers that because the people care, right? So you don't want to wind up with a horrible boss like your scenario, Megan.
Yeah.
Like you want to be at a place where people care. And it's okay sometimes to have, those disagreements or you're going to have frustration. I've had people frustrate me more times than I can count, but I
Mhm.
think to some capacity, it's that you've built that relationship, you have that trust, you have that transparency. And so when it comes time to get bad news or feedback or whatever it may be, it's just a normal day, right? It's
Yeah.
it's it's a trained ability. So I think that is an important point as you all look into what those opportunities look like. That is something I would kind of put in my back pocket. What resources do you provide? What training opportunities do you provide? Chances are if they're spending in that capacity, they're going to have a really good fleshed out model of providing you with insights on how to grow and be a better person, a better leader, and a better member of their organization.
I love that. I love that. And students, you guys can write that down. That would be a great question to ask in the interview when you're interviewing with companies, because again, they will ask you, what questions do you have for us? That would be an excellent question to ask in the interview. What resources do you have to help me grow in the organization? What to help me develop? What professional development? That kind of stuff. That's excellent, Ryan. I know that we're kind of coming up on time, but I do want to ask you, do you have a time that you could share with us? I know kind of briefly, but about when somebody did point out, or whether it was you or it happened to you, or when you had the opportunity to point out when someone did kind of make a mistake, but that did it without demoralizing or did it in a really good way that was positive and positively impacted the organization.
Yeah, and by the way, you're keeping me from screaming kids at a pool, so this can go as long over as it has to. I'm totally fine. I would say one good example I have, and she's a very good friend right now. But she was someone I hired at Orlando City, and I really think is just a fantastic individual in person beyond the workplace, but also just really, really picked up her job very quickly. And I would attribute that to like she just constantly asks, like, what could I do better? Right? Sometimes it's like, listen, I don't have anything for you right now. Other times it's actually, yeah, glad you brought it up, right? I have two things for you. So we had a really good relationship. She still calls me, to ask for that stuff, which is great. So a specific area I would give you, I think one thing and she wouldn't mind me saying this, one thing that I think she's very good at is really understanding the scope of her role and the magnitude that it has and creating an amazing experience, on match day. So I think that was a strength. Her passion for the role sometimes supersedes process. So in other words, like I want to have this ready at this time. Other people have to just move at my speed. Right. Well, when you have that philosophy, that's a great mindset to have. But sometimes there's reasons people can't move at the same speed you're moving at, right? Like, and I'll give you a silly example, but like, in college, when you're doing group work or a class and you have some members of your group who are non-existent and there's no reason for it versus other members of your group, they're an athlete and they're on the road and then they get back and they work different hours. Like it's kind of in that capacity, right? Like sometimes it's difficult to tell why some people aren't moving at the same rate of speed. But I would say, like all in all, you know, that was one area I had to talk to her about. Well, the challenge is that's not really an actionable thing, right? There's nothing I could really say to point to that says, hey, you're all, and how do you tell somebody that? Hey, you're moving too quick. And
Yeah.
that's tough feedback to give, right? So I think we dove a little deeper and it was, I think you're so work focused that you're not actually getting to build relationships with people. And by building those relationships, they would move faster for you. So I actually think it's a good example of sometimes, my pinpoint focus was you have to slow down. The actual feedback after a conversation with her was, we need you to build better relationships with people because you're
Oh,
so focused on the work side, right? So I think that's like an important story for two reasons. One, I think it shows the importance of diving in a little deeper, right? Like it's never a bad idea to do trial close or ask why. Trial close is when you're just trying to affirm something. If I'm hearing
hmm.
you right, this is where you're at. Yes. Okay. Well, if that makes sense, then this is where you're at. Yes. Once you get three yeses, you can kind of cross it off your list. But then the second too is like, you just kind of dive deeper into it. Always ask why. Well, why do you think this project is taking longer? Well, I think it's taking longer because these individuals, are just they're just not wanting to move on this. They don't think it's a good idea. Okay, well, why do you think they don't think it's a good idea? Like, let's self-audit your project. Let's self-audit your task. And so through that discovery process, I'll call it, that's where we came up with, hey, I think actually you're doing fine. I think what we need to work on is your just personal skills around the office. Like let's hyper focus on that and get you into more authentic relationships cross departmentally. get them to know you as a person versus you as the worker, and it's going to create more opportunities for you.
I like that. I like that. That's a lot better than just saying you suck. So professionally.
Well, and it's tough too because sometimes, right? Like, and you guys will experience this even in your entering the workforce. Like, it's one thing to criticize someone from a professional side. You
Hmm.
know, that's almost like a personality trait. So how do you kind of give feedback on someone's personality, right? Like you
Right,
kind of have
right,
to shift away from that. I'm not telling you to change your personality. I'm just saying from the workflow side, you need to focus on this versus saying, hey, you're too aggressive.
right.
Well,
Yeah, because
that's
you can't,
the eye of the
that's
beholder, right? That's just my
right.
opinion. So to make it actionable, it's like, hey, I want you once a month, you're going to meet with a new department for an hour over lunch or coffee or whatever, and get out of the office and get to know them. Like I can create actionable steps now against that and then see what the outcomes are X amount of months down the line.
No, I love that. I love that focusing on the strengths and then saying, okay, these are the things that we need to work on. That's goes back to the first thing that you said, the specific, the actionable, it's very clear and it's very, it takes out a lot of the ambiguity, just like, okay, this is what we're going to work on. And then it also it feels like it's like you're kind of chunking it out. And instead of this like this big over like this big umbrella, which again could be very ambiguous and very like almost overwhelming, let's just take one small thing at a time and kind of break it up. And just to kind of
Yeah.
close this out, this is a really great talk, and I think that we could probably go on and on and on because
Yeah.
this is super, super important. And this is workplace, this is interpersonal, this is relationship. And like I said, this is near and dear to my heart because I'm personally, like, I'm always trying to be the best version of myself as a person, as a friend, as a partner, as a mother, as an employee, but mostly as a mother, like, because I'm always checking in with my kids, like, hey, how am I doing? Like, give it to me straight. Give it to me straight. What can I do better? What can I do more of? And I don't want to hear that I'm doing something wrong, but I'm leaning into that, and I want to hear what I'm doing wrong so that I can fix it. Versus I find out 20 years later that my kids are like, "Yeah, mom, it was kind of tough, being your kid." I don't want to hear that. Just like I don't want my students down the road to be like, "Yeah, you were okay as a professor, but you really kind of sucked." But yeah, lean into that, guys. Lean into it. Be okay with hearing things that you don't necessarily want to hear, but hopefully you're getting it from from kindness, from someone who wants to help you grow, and you're not going to have wonderful bosses all of your life, but you will be blessed, hopefully with some good ones. This is just such a great talk, Ryan. Thank you again so, so, so much for taking the time away from your family and from your vacation, sharing your thoughts and insights with us. Students, thank you so much for sharing your time and listening in with us. Again, please scan the QR code or click the link in the chat pod. You can connect with Ryan. He's on the second floor of Becker. Can they connect with you also on LinkedIn if they want to connect with you further as well?
Yeah, connect on LinkedIn. Feel free to send me an email if you want to stop by my office. It's BBB214. And I'm happy to chat on this more. I'm happy to chat on sports more. I'm happy to chat on career, all that stuff. So yeah, feel free to stop by anytime.
All right, that's wonderful. Okay, so thank you, everybody. Sorry we went a little bit over, but yeah, I think we could just go on and on. This is a
Yeah.
great topic. All right, Ryan, thanks so much. Get back to your family and back to your vacation. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you all.
Bye.